Hey, what up, guys? This is Ryan with Brainstorm. So ratios are a tool, or ratios are a way to compare two numbers, and that's really all that you do with ratios, right? And that's what they're valuable for, is if you have two figures, you can kind of compare them in a ratio. So you might have something like, maybe you have some little camp, and you have 6 boys and 7 girls, and you could say, what's the ratio of boys to girls? And it would be 6 to 7, right? But be careful, because the order does matter. So if they said what's the ratio of boys to girls, you'd be accurate in saying 6 to 7. But they might say what's the ratio of girls to boys, and be careful, order does matter. So the ratio of girls to boys would be 7 to 6. So really, it's not tricky. Ratios are really helpful, and they're useful in real life. The only thing that's kind of weird about them is there's really kind of 3 ways to present ratios, right? And so the first one is just a fraction, right? You could say, if they said, what's the ratio of boys to girls? You could say 6 boys over 7 girls. And so that's kind of common. You'll see them as fractions, 6 to 7, 6 over 7. And that's a normal ratio. Another way is with a colon. So if I said, what's the ratio of boys to girls? You could say 6 to 7, like that. This is probably the most common, to be honest, except the last one is really common as well. And they just write it just like you say it. What's the ratio of boys to girls? 6 to 7. And again, if they said what's the ratio of girls to boys, you'd write 7 to 6. Girls to boys up here would be 7 to 6, and girls to boys over here would be, the girls would be on top, 7 girls for every 6 boys. So it's pretty straightforward. And so let me just throw a bunch of scenarios at you and see if you can nail them. Again, I'll throw a scenario at you and ask you to kind of form a ratio, and then you can pause it and see if you can do it before I do. All right, here's one. Maybe you have, 11 girls on a baseball team or on a softball team, right? So you have 11 girls are on the team, but they only have 4 bats to share. They don't each have a bat, so there's, 4 bats that they kind of circulate among the 3 girls on the softball team. So that's a perfect scenario for me to ask you a ratio. Well, what's the ratio of bats to girls? That would be 4 to 11, right? I like the colon way, but you can write it any of the 3 ways. Yeah, bats to girls, 4 to 11. But you might say, what's the ratio of girls to bats? You could say 11, and we'll do another way to 4. Totally easy. Honestly, this is one of those lessons where right away you're like, okay, Ryan, hold your tongue. I already got this thing mastered. Let me give a few more scenarios, but they really are as easy as they look. You find a ratio by doing exactly what we're doing. So here's another one. Maybe to make a batch of cookies, it takes 3 eggs for every 1 cup of flour. So what's my ratio of eggs to flour? That would be 3 to 1, right? What's my ratio of flour to eggs? 1 to 3. And again, who cares how you represented it? Whatever format the person talking to you prefers, do it that way. You could say easily, again, eggs to flour. Well, you could write 3 eggs to every 1 cup of flour. It's totally good. This is shorter and quicker, but that's the same thing. All right, one more scenario, and then I refuse to quiz you more because this is too easy. All right, look at this one. Maybe there's a rule with city planners where they're like, well, how many police officers do we need to have in this city? And maybe there's a kind of a ratio, like, well, for every 500 homes, you should have 10 police officers, right? And so you could say, well, what's the ratio of police officers to homes? And that would be 10 to 500. And interestingly, you can reduce. So when it comes to a ratio, 10 to 500 is the same as if I divided both by 10. That's what reducing is, right? I could easily have 1 to 50, which is also good. That is the correct ratio as well, and it's a better way to represent it, right? So what's my ratio of police to homes? 10 to 500. What's my ratio of homes to police? That would be 50 to 1. Again, reduced version of 500 to 10. So that's it. All that you're learning in this video is that ratios exist and that why they're useful to present data. You don't want to tell people things in paragraphs all the time. You just say, hey, this is the ratio of police officers we need to homes, and 1 to 50, and you're done. All right, hopefully that made sense, and hopefully you guys will see ratios around town and you'll start to recognize them and use them yourselves. Okay, good luck.